On a clear spring morning in 1945, 6 people ventured into the forests of Oregon for a simple Sunday school picnic. Reverend Archie Mitchell drove his pregnant wife, Elsie, and 5 excited children up the slopes of Gearhart Mountain, seeking a break from the routines of wartime America. The war seemed distant, a world away across the Pacific. But the war was closer than anyone imagined. While Reverend Mitchell parked the car, Elsie and the children wandered ahead through the towering ponderosa pines. Then, one of them spotted something unusual lying on the forest floor. A large, deflated object, partially buried, with strange attachments and wires. Before Reverend Mitchell could reach them, a massive explosion tore through the trees. Elsie Mitchell and all 5 children, Edward Engine, age 13, Jay Gifford, 13, Dick Potsky, 14, Sherman Shoemaker, 11, and Joan Potsky, 13, were killed instantly or died within moments. They became the only combat fatalities on the continental United States during World War II. Not from bombers, not from submarines, but from a weapon so strange, so audacious, that most Americans had never heard of it. These 6 innocent lives were claimed by one of the war's most unconventional weapons, the Japanese Fugo balloon bomb, a hydrogen-filled paper balloon designed to float thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean, carried by winds no one knew existed, to rain fire and terror on American soil. Between November 1944 and April 1945, Japan launched approximately 9,000 of these silent assassins into the jet stream. Most vanished without a trace. Some exploded over the ocean. Others drifted to Earth in remote forests, prairies, and mountains. A few reached as far east as Michigan. This is the story of Operation Fugo, Japan's desperate gamble to strike back at America using nothing but paper, hydrogen, and the invisible rivers of wind flowing high above the Earth. It was the world's first intercontinental weapon system, predating ballistic missiles by more than a decade. But how did this audacious plan come to be? What drove Japanese engineers to dream of attacking a continent 6,000 miles away with balloons made of mulberry paper? And why did the American government impose a total media blackout to keep the public in the dark? To understand the balloon bombs, we must return to a moment of humiliation and rage in Tokyo, a moment that would spark one of the war's strangest and most tragic campaigns. This is the untold story of the Japanese balloon bombs that threatened North America.
April 18, 1942, the skies over Tokyo erupted in chaos. 16 American B-25 bombers, led by Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, roared over the Japanese capital in broad daylight, dropping bombs on military and industrial targets. The raid, launched from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, shocked the Japanese military establishment to its core. The Doolittle raid caused relatively little physical damage, but psychologically it was devastating. Japan's leaders had promised the homeland was invulnerable. Now American bombers had struck the very heart of the empire. Emperor Hirohito himself was shaken. Military commanders faced intense pressure to retaliate, to strike back at the American mainland and restore national honor. But there was one enormous problem: distance. Japan's bombers lacked the range to reach the United States. Aircraft carriers couldn't penetrate American defenses, Submarines couldn't carry enough explosives to make a difference. Invading Alaska or the West Coast was logistically impossible. Japan needed a weapon that could cross the Pacific without fuel, without pilots, and without detection. Entered the Imperial Japanese Army's Special Balloon Regiment, a team of engineers, meteorologists, and scientists tasked with developing an unprecedented long-range weapon. Their solution was as elegant as it was radical: exploit the newly discovered jet stream. In the 1920s and 1930s, Japanese meteorologist Wasaburo Oishi had observed powerful, high-altitude winds flowing from west to east across the Pacific, winds that could reach speeds of 100 miles per hour during winter months. Western scientists had largely ignored Oishi's findings, but Japanese military planners saw an opportunity. If they could build balloons capable of riding these winds, they could send weapons across the ocean, transforming the jet stream itself into a delivery system.
By 1944, with Japan's situation growing increasingly desperate, the Fugo project received full authorization. Engineers designed hydrogen-filled balloons 33 feet in diameter, constructed from laminated mulberry paper, strong, lightweight, and available despite wartime shortages. Each balloon would carry a deadly payload: 4 11-pound incendiary bombs and 1 33-pound high-explosive anti-personnel bomb. But the true genius lay in the balloon's autopilot system. Barometric altimeters monitored altitude continuously. If the balloon climbed too high and risked bursting, automatic valves released hydrogen. If it sank too low, sandbag ballast was dropped to regain altitude. This elegant feedback system kept the balloons within the narrow altitude band of the jet stream, between 30,000 and 38,000 feet, ensuring they stayed on course toward North America. After approximately 3 days, the time needed to cross the Pacific, a timer would arm the bombs and release them over the target zone. The plan was ambitious and chilling. Japanese strategists hoped the balloons would ignite massive forest fires across the western United States and Canada, forcing America to divert resources from the war effort to firefighting and civil defense. Beyond the physical damage, the psychological impact could be profound. If American civilians realized their homeland was under attack from an invisible, unstoppable threat, panic might spread. Morale could collapse. By autumn 1944, production was in full swing. Thousands of Japanese schoolgirls, working in converted sumo halls and theaters, assembled the balloons by hand, pasting together strips of mulberry paper with a potato-based adhesive called konnyaku. The workers had no idea what they were building. Security was absolute. Launch sites were established along the eastern coast of Honshu, Japan's main island. Everything was ready. The jet stream winds of winter were approaching. Operation Fugo was about to begin. November 1944. Along the windswept coasts of Honshu, Japanese soldiers prepared for one of the most unusual military operations in history. The launch sites were simple: open clearings near the shoreline, chosen for their exposure to prevailing winds and proximity to the jet stream's entry point over the Pacific. Each Fugo balloon represented a remarkable feat of wartime engineering. The envelope, the balloon's main body, measured 33 feet in diameter when fully inflated. Its construction was painstaking. 4 to 5 layers of mulberry paper, called washi, were laminated together using konnyaku paste derived from the konjac plant. This created a material both lightweight and surprisingly strong, capable of withstanding the extreme cold and pressure changes of high-altitude flight. But paper alone wasn't enough. The seams had to be perfect. A single weak point could cause catastrophic failure at altitude. That's where Japan's civilian workforce came in. Across the country, thousands of schoolgirls, some as young as 12, were mobilized to manufacture the balloons. They worked in converted sumo wrestling halls, theaters, and other large buildings where the massive balloon envelopes could be laid out flat. The girls sat cross-legged on the paper, carefully brushing konnyaku paste onto each seam, overlapping strips with precision. It was tedious, repetitive work. The paste dried quickly, requiring constant attention. The girls' hands grew raw from the chemicals, but they were told they were contributing to a secret weapon that would help win the war. Once assembled, each balloon was tested for leaks by inflating it indoors. Workers listened for the telltale hiss of escaping hydrogen. Defective balloons were patched or scrapped entirely. The successful ones moved to the next phase, attachment of the control mechanism. Suspended beneath each balloon was an ingenious device that resembled a chandelier, a metal framework holding the balloon's autopilot, ballast, and weapons. At the top was the altimeter, a barometric pressure sensor that triggered the release mechanism. The balloon's ideal cruising altitude was 30,000 to 38,000 feet, where the jet stream winds were strongest.
During the day, as sunlight warmed the hydrogen, the balloon would rise. If it climbed above 38,000 feet, an automatic valve released gas to prevent overexpansion and bursting. At night, as temperatures dropped, the hydrogen cooled and contracted, causing the balloon to descend. When it fell below 30,000 feet, the altimeter triggered the release of sandbags, lightening the load and restoring altitude. 32 sandbags hung from the control mechanism, each carefully calibrated to provide just enough lift. The system was designed to operate autonomously for up to 70 hours, the estimated flight time to reach North America. After the ballast was exhausted, a final triggering device armed the bombs and released them. Seconds later, a flash bomb ignited the remaining hydrogen, destroying the balloon to eliminate evidence. The payload itself was lethal. 4 Type 97 incendiary bombs, each weighing 5 kilograms, were designed to ignite forest fires. And one 15-kilogram Type 92 high-explosive bomb, packed with picric acid, was intended to kill firefighters or anyone who discovered the device. It was this anti-personnel bomb that would claim 6 lives in Oregon. Japanese military planners understood the odds. They knew most balloons would fail, lost over the ocean, destroyed by weather, or malfunctioning mechanically. But if even a small percentage reached their targets, the psychological and strategic impact could justify the effort. The targets were carefully chosen: the forests of the Pacific Northwest, where dry timber and seasonal winds could turn a single incendiary bomb into a raging inferno. Intelligence reports suggested American firefighting resources were already stretched thin. Massive forest fires could divert troops, equipment, and attention from the war effort. For Japan, Fugo represented more than military strategy. It was a symbol of defiance, proof that even as American bombers pounded Japanese cities and Marines advanced across the Pacific, the empire could still strike back at the enemy's homeland.
By late October 1944, everything was ready. Launch crews drilled repeatedly, perfecting the delicate process of inflating, arming, and releasing the balloons. Meteorologists monitored weather patterns, waiting for optimal jet stream conditions. Intelligence officers prepared psychological warfare messages to be broadcast if the campaign succeeded. And in Tokyo, military leaders held their breath, hoping this desperate gamble might shift the momentum of a war they were losing. On November 3, 1944, the first Fugo balloons lifted silently into the sky, disappearing into the clouds over the Pacific. Operation Fugo had begun.
November 4, 1944. Off the coast of San Pedro, California, a U.S. Navy patrol ship spotted something strange bobbing in the water. A deflated paper balloon, 33 feet across, with Japanese markings and a suspicious metal framework. It was the first Fugo balloon discovered by American forces. The war's strangest campaign had reached its target. Over the next 5 months, Japan would launch approximately 9,000 balloons from coastal sites across Honshu. They rose into the freezing stratosphere, caught the jet stream, and began their 3-day journey across 6,000 miles of open ocean. The journey was brutal. Balloons faced temperatures as low as -60 degrees Fahrenheit, high-altitude winds that could tear them apart, and storms that swallowed them whole. Most never made it, but hundreds did. By war's end, approximately 300 balloon incidents would be recorded across the western United States, Canada, Alaska, and even Mexico. Some balloons traveled astonishingly far inland, reaching Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota, and even Michigan. On November 14, 1944, fragments of a second balloon were recovered off the coast of Hawaii. Then more appeared in Wyoming, Montana, Alaska, and Oregon. The discoveries came in clusters, sometimes several in a single day, then weeks of silence, then another wave. American military intelligence was baffled. What were these devices? Where were they coming from? How were they crossing the Pacific? Initial theories ranged from submarines releasing balloons near the coast to aircraft deploying them from high altitude. Some even suggested German U-boats might be involved. But careful analysis of the materials, the distinctive mulberry paper, the Japanese markings, and the sophisticated altitude control system pointed unmistakably to Japan. And then meteorologists made a stunning discovery. The balloons were riding the jet stream, a ribbon of high-altitude wind that flowed directly from Japan to North America. The implications were staggering. Japan had created the world's first intercontinental weapons system, a device that could strike targets thousands of miles away without aircraft, without submarines, without human pilots. As winter turned to spring, incidents multiplied. On January 4, 1945, a balloon bomb ignited a small forest fire near Thermopolis, Wyoming. Firefighters contained it quickly.
On February 1st, another balloon descended near Kalispell, Montana, startling witnesses who watched it drift silently to Earth. In Alaska, a balloon struck a power line, causing a brief blackout at a remote military installation. One balloon caused particular alarm. It struck high-voltage power lines near Hanford, Washington, the site of a top-secret plutonium production facility for the Manhattan Project. The resulting blackout shut down nuclear reactors for several minutes. Had Japan known what they'd hit, they might have intensified the campaign. But they didn't know, and that was about to become Operation Fugo's fatal flaw. In Washington, D.C., military and civilian leaders faced a critical decision. Should they warn the public about the balloon threat or keep it secret? Warning people might prevent casualties, but it would also tell Japan their weapons were reaching America, possibly encouraging them to launch more. The decision was made: total media blackout. The Office of Censorship issued a directive to every newspaper, radio station, and magazine in the country. Do not report balloon bomb incidents. Do not speculate about their origin. Do not mention them at all. Remarkably, the press complied. Not a single major outlet broke the story. Even when balloons landed in populated areas, witnesses were sworn to secrecy. Back in Japan, military commanders waited anxiously for reports of their campaign success. They monitored American radio broadcasts, searched for any mention of forest fires, analyzed reconnaissance photos for signs of damage. They found nothing. American censorship was so effective that Japan concluded the Fugo campaign was a complete failure. In April 1945, discouraged by the apparent lack of results and facing critical shortages of hydrogen and materials, Japan suspended Operation Fugo. The last balloons launched on April 7, 1945, more than 3 weeks before the tragic incident in Oregon. May 5, 1945, Gearhart Mountain, Oregon. Reverend Archie Mitchell and his church group set out for their Sunday picnic, unaware that a balloon bomb had been lying dormant in the forest for weeks. The explosion that killed Elsie Mitchell and the 5 children finally broke the government's silence. On May 22, 1945, the Office of Censorship lifted its ban, issuing public warnings about unexploded balloon bombs scattered across the western states. But by then, the campaign was already over. From the moment the first balloon washed ashore in California, American military and intelligence agencies mobilized to understand and counter the threat. The response involved cooperation across multiple branches: the Navy, Army, FBI, Forest Service, and even civilian scientists. Bomb disposal teams carefully disarmed recovered balloons, transporting components to laboratories for detailed analysis. Geologists examined the sandbags, discovering that the sand came from specific beaches near Tokyo, providing crucial intelligence about the launch site's location. Botanists studied the paper, identifying the mulberry trees used in its manufacture. Chemists analyzed the konnyaku paste. Every detail was scrutinized. Meteorologists worked to predict balloon trajectories. If they could forecast where balloons might land, they could position interception forces and warn civilians. Aircraft patrols were established along the Pacific coast and inland, hunting for balloons in flight. Fighter pilots shot down several, though most flew too high to be easily intercepted. On the ground, a specialized unit took on firefighting duties. The 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion, nicknamed the Triple Nickels, became the first African-American paratroopers in U.S. history. In an operation codenamed Firefly, they parachuted into remote forests to combat fires potentially started by balloon bombs. Though few Fugo devices actually ignited major fires, the Triple Nickels' readiness demonstrated American resolve to counter even the most unconventional threats. After the Oregon tragedy, public education became a priority. The government issued warnings: if you see an unusual balloon or debris in the forest, don't touch it. Report it immediately. Posters appeared in post offices, schools, and ranger stations across the West. Radio broadcasts urged vigilance. Ultimately, the Allied response was multi-layered and effective. Intelligence gathering revealed the weapon's origin and operation. Censorship denied Japan feedback on the campaign's success, and rapid mobilization prevented mass casualties. But the 6 deaths in Oregon were a stark reminder. Even a seemingly primitive weapon, in the right circumstances, could be deadly. Military planners also understood the strategic implications. If Japan had developed this technology earlier, or in greater quantities, the impact could have been severe. Forest fires during dry summer months might have overwhelmed firefighting resources. Panic among civilians could have diverted attention and resources from the war effort. There were darker possibilities, too. Intelligence analysts worried that Japan might weaponize the balloons with biological or chemical agents. Captured documents later revealed Japan had considered exactly that, though they never implemented such plans before the war ended. By August 1945, with Japan's surrender, Operation Fugo was relegated to history. American forces occupying Japan dismantled the remaining launch sites and interrogated the program's architects. The full scope of the campaign finally came into focus. 9,000 balloons launched, approximately 1,000 reaching North America, 300 causing recorded incidents, and 6 tragic deaths.
In the immediate aftermath, military analysts debated whether Operation Fugo should be classified as a success or failure. On one hand, the campaign achieved its primary objective, delivering explosives to the American mainland. That alone was a remarkable feat of engineering and meteorology. On the other hand, the strategic impact was minimal. No major forest fires erupted. No widespread panic ensued. American morale remained unshaken. Several factors contributed to Fugo's limited effectiveness. First, timing. The balloons arrived during winter and early spring, when Pacific Northwest forests were wet and less prone to fire. Had the campaign begun in summer, the results might have been catastrophic. Second, the autopilot system, while ingenious, was unreliable. Many balloons malfunctioned, crashed prematurely, or drifted off course. Third, and most critically, American censorship denied Japan any feedback. Without confirmation that their balloons were reaching targets, Japanese commanders lost faith in the campaign and shut it down. Had they known the truth, that hundreds of balloons successfully crossed the Pacific, they might have persisted, refined the design, and caused far greater damage. For the families of the 6 victims, the aftermath was devastating. Reverend Archie Mitchell lost his wife and unborn child. The 5 children's families lost sons and daughters. In 1950, a memorial was erected at the site of the explosion. The Mitchell Monument stands to this day, a solemn reminder of the war's only combat casualties on the continental United States. Decades later, in 1987, a group of Japanese women who had manufactured the balloons as schoolgirls traveled to Oregon. They delivered 1,000 paper cranes to the victims' families, a traditional symbol of peace and healing. It was an act of reconciliation, acknowledging the unintended tragedy their wartime work had caused. The technological legacy of Fugo is undeniable. The balloon bombs represented the world's first intercontinental weapons system, predating ICBMs by over a decade.
The exploitation of the jet stream for military purposes was revolutionary. Today, meteorologists and military planners still study the Fugo campaign for insights into high-altitude wind patterns and intercontinental delivery systems. Beyond military applications, Fugo demonstrated principles that would later be used in weather balloons, scientific research, and even space exploration. The concept of autonomous, wind-driven systems traversing vast distances influenced aerospace engineering for generations. Even today, occasional balloon fragments are discovered in remote areas of the western United States and Canada. Bomb disposal teams are still called to neutralize these 75-year-old devices. The threat may be dormant, but it is not entirely extinct. Perhaps most significantly, Operation Fugo serves as a case study in psychological warfare and the importance of information control. American censorship was remarkably effective, so effective it convinced Japan to abandon a potentially devastating weapon. It was a victory achieved not with bullets or bombs, but with silence. 75 years after the last balloon bomb fell to Earth, the story of Operation Fugo remains one of World War II's most unusual and tragic chapters. It was a campaign born of desperation, executed with ingenuity, and ultimately thwarted by secrecy and circumstance. The 9,000 balloons launched by Japan represent more than a military operation. They symbolize the lengths to which nations will go in wartime, the creativity, the risk-taking, and sometimes the tragedy that results. For the victims in Oregon, the balloon bomb was not a footnote or a curiosity. It was a sudden, devastating loss that forever marked their families and their community. Reverend Archie Mitchell would spend the rest of his life honoring his wife and the children lost that day. He continued his ministry, never forgetting the moment the war reached his doorstep. Their story is a reminder that war's reach extends beyond battlefields. The technology can turn even a picnic into a tragedy. The Fugo campaign also revealed the power of nature. The jet stream, invisible, constant, indifferent, carried instruments of death across an ocean. It was a force of nature weaponized, a reminder that ingenuity can harness even the wind. Today, we understand the jet stream far better than anyone in 1944. We track it, model it, exploit it for aviation and weather prediction. But the Fugo balloons were the first to ride it across the Pacific, silent pioneers in a deadly mission. In the decade since the war, Japan and the United States have forged a lasting alliance. The animosity and devastation of World War II have given way to partnership and mutual respect. The paper cranes delivered to Oregon were not just symbols of apology, they were gestures toward a future where former enemies could acknowledge past wounds and work toward healing. Yet the physical remnants of Operation Fugo remain. Bomb disposal experts still encounter balloon fragments in the wilderness. Each discovery is a tangible link to a nearly forgotten campaign, a reminder that history's dangers can linger long after the fighting stops. For historians, the Fugo campaign offers lessons in innovation, psychological warfare, and the unpredictability of conflict. It challenges us to think beyond conventional strategies, to consider how desperation creates creativity, and how silence can be as powerful as violence. And for all of us, the story of the Japanese balloon bombs is a meditation on the unexpected consequences of war. A Sunday school picnic, a curious discovery, an explosion that changed lives forever. 6 innocent people became the only combat casualties on the U.S. mainland during World War II, not from a planned invasion, not from a targeted strike, but from a silent balloon that drifted across the Pacific on winds no one controlled. Their names deserve to be remembered: Elsie Mitchell, Edward Engine, Jay Gifford, Dick Patsky, Joan Patsky, and Sherman Shoemaker. They remind us that war's reach is long, its weapons unpredictable, and its costs borne by the innocent. This has been the story of Operation Fugo, the Japanese balloon bombs that threatened North America. A tale of innovation, tragedy, and the winds of war that carried death across an ocean. If you want to explore more untold stories from World War II, subscribe to The Hidden Age. Every week we bring history to life through the voices, diaries, and memories of those who lived it. Remember the past, understand the present, and never forget the cost of war.